All right, the room seems to be filling up nicely. Welcome to everybody in the first in a series of webinars that Sable International is hosting on obtaining UK nationality through former UK colonies or territories. Today we will be looking at links to the UK via Bechuanaland or modern day Botswana. My name is John. I'm the sales director of the Citizenship and Immigration Division in Sable International. Just some housekeeping before we start. We will have a live Q&A at the end of the session. If you'd like to post some questions on the right-hand side of your screen, there will be a little chat box. You can post your question. I'll jot them down for the speakers at the end, and we'll get through as many as we can. If there are enough questions or too many questions that we can't get to towards the end, what we will do is we will try to answer those via email at the end of the session. The screen that you can see is split into two with the speakers and the presentation. If you'd like to expand the presentation to make it slightly bigger, you'll see two arrows on the top right-hand side of your screen. If you click on that, the presentation will expand. And then, of course, there's also a little plus or a minus button on the right-hand side of the guest panel's screen. If you click on that, it will minimize the speaker's window. Just a little bit about Sable International before we begin. Sable International started in 1995. We have offices in the UK, SA, Australia, and a presence in Portugal. We have 4 core services that we specialize in, and we believe that these services encompass vital aspects of our clients' needs that they have when investing offshore or moving abroad. The 4 core services are citizenship, immigration and investment migration, foreign exchange, offshore wealth management, and cross-border tax and accounting. Our speakers today, or our guests on here, are Philip Gamble, full trained with the Home Office within their Citizenship Directorate until 1992. Phil is widely regarded as one of the foremost authority in the world on British nationality law and the effects of decolonization within the former British Empire. In the middle of your screen, you'll have Michelle Patel. Michelle was born in Mombasa, Kenya, and relocated to the UK in 2004. Michelle joined Sable International in 2009 and is a registered OISC advisor and specializes in isolating claims to British nationality for those who have connections to former British territories and who are residents in the UK and those adopted by British citizens. Not to keep you waiting much longer, I'm going to hand you over to Philip Gamble to start his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, John. The slide that you're seeing on screen presently draws up a picture of the status of Botswana over the course of the last century or so, and some key dates in terms of British nationality legislation. Okay, so what we have to do when we're looking at your family lines to determine whether you have a claim to British nationality or not is simply to apply the law that was in force at certain key dates in the past. So that might be at the time when an ancestor is born, looking at the status of the country then, seeing which citizenship is acquired by birth. We're then looking at the generation before to see if any form, or indeed additional form, because there are many, of British nationality is acquired by descent. When we take all of those into account, we then also have to look at the independence arrangements for the territories concerned. This seminar is obviously going to focus on Botswana or Bechuanaland on its own. And if any residual status is left from the point of birth, then these rights can be brought forward to the modern day and British passports issued. So this is basically what we call a status trace. So it's looking at the family line as a whole to see which forms of British nationality have been acquired by birth and descent, whether they survive Independence Day arrangements and whether they can be brought forward for descendants in the modern day. The concepts of the loss of British nationality with the independence arrangements we call automatic loss, and you'll see this is a key feature as we go through. So that's in essence about what we do. The next slides will show you some practical examples of how it all works. So on the slide you now have in front of you, you've got an applicant born before 1983. That's a key date in British nationality law when the British Nationality Act 1981 comes into force. Father born in Bechuanaland. When you see the word Bechuanaland, you'll know that we're talking about the territory whilst it's still under British control, so before 1966. So in this case, we know that the father is born in a place which is a British protectorate. So a form of British nationality is conferred at birth called British protection, or British protected person status if you prefer. The applicant being born before 1983, also in Bechuanaland, has a chance to acquire that status by descent. And those who acquire British protection in the modern day are entitled to British passports in the same way as any other person in the modern day. So you've already seen that there's a different form of British nationality called British protection that's distinct from British citizenship, and different rights are associated with each one. Okay, now moving on to the next slide, you'll see that there's a difference here. This time we've got the father born in the Bechuanaland Protectorate and the applicant born in an independent Commonwealth country before 1966, which is Independence Day. So the reason why we've got these two different varieties is to explain about the concept of automatic loss. So with the first slide, we've just got the father being born in Bechuanaland. Now, on independence of this territory, laws conferred citizenship of Botswana onto all persons born there, with some exceptions aside. The exceptions we're going to go through in more detail as we go through. But one of those exceptions is where the applicant themselves holds citizenship of another country. So if you're looking at this particular example on the latest slide, if the applicant's born in an independent country, or probably an independent Commonwealth country, that person is likely to have picked up local citizenship. Let's say South African citizenship if the person's born in South Africa. One of the exemptions to automatic loss of British colonial nationality is where the applicant picks up another nationality at birth, which would indeed be the case here. So unlike the first slide, if we go back to that for just a moment, where there's no connection outside of Bechuanaland, you can assume that probably the automatic loss of colonial nationality has come into play. But with the second slide, because you've got a mix of territories, the father being born in Bechuanaland and the applicant being born in perhaps South Africa or another independent Commonwealth country, then a claim is likely for modern day British protected person status. Okay, on to the next variety, next slides. You've got two varieties here. You've got the applicant being born in Bechuanaland whilst it was still a protected territory, and you've got the father or the parent born in Bechuanaland, specifically parent here. Now, we put this slide up because it demonstrates, again, a proper example of how people acquire British nationality through connection with this territory. So the first example, grandfather born in the UK, parent born in Bechuanaland, applicant not born in the territory of Bechuanaland. Where you see the applicant or the parent being born in that territory whilst it was still a British protected or British protectorate or protected state, if you prefer, then you'll find that British nationality flows two generations by descent, not just one. We're all familiar with the concept of if you're born in South Africa or Botswana and you have a parent born in the UK, you're probably British. That's British citizenship in the first generation by descent. but very often you'll get claims which arise in the second generation by descent, and they figure specifically where you've got a parent born in a British protectorate or British protected state, or the applicant is at the time. Now, a further complication with these cases is simply that there has to be an exemption to automatic loss of colonial nationality on independence of the territory concerned. And what you'll find is if you have a grandfather born in the UK, that gives you an exemption in the same way as perhaps acquiring another nationality at birth, as we saw in the previous slides. Okay. Well, yes, that's a very good question. We do have problems with legitimate birth. Generally speaking, claims in the male line, not the female line, would always require legitimate birth. The UK government has only recently tried to address this by bringing in some further legislation. In fact, it wasn't until 2014 that there was any hope for a claim to UK citizenship in the male line where there was illegitimacy involved. What you will find, unfortunately, though, is they've only gone so far with this remedy. And if you yourself are born illegitimately, there's a remedy to that. But if it was a parent or a grandparent, then the position is still as it was originally, and there's no remedy for that type of position.
Thanks, Phil. Just to repeat my question for those who didn't hear me, because I've been told that there was an issue with there, was that you do need a legitimate birth or a parent born legitimately to claim the exemption in the main line to where you have an applicant born in Bechuanaland or have a connection to Bechuanaland. Is that correct, Phil?
Normally, generally speaking, said if you're looking at male line descent, the line has to be legitimate. Unless we're looking at illegitimacy with the applicants themselves rather than a parent or a grandparent, in which case there is a remedy and a different type of application that can be made.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I think that sort of takes us on to the next slide, which I'll take over. So I'm going to be talking about the next sort of 3 scenarios, and each of these scenarios, as you will see, is very different from what Phil mentioned. And in fact, there are certain scenarios here which actually doesn't even have a UK-born grandparent at all. So unlike the previous examples where you had UK-born grandparents, in this scenarios, you will see that we don't have those UK-born grandparents. So if we just go into the next slide, you'll see exactly what I mean. So in this slide, we have purposely chosen a paternal grandfather born in Swaziland. And the reason why we've chosen a paternal grandfather born in Swaziland is because Swaziland became independent after Bechuanaland. And for this reason, would almost be as good as having a UK-born grandparent in terms of the exemption to automatic loss on the day Bechuanaland became independent. So in this scenario, if you have this exact same case in your lineage, and if you are an applicant born in Bechuanaland with a paternal grandfather born in Swaziland, then we can sort of confirm that it would lead to a status called British overseas citizenship in the modern day. I won't talk too much about British overseas citizenship in great detail, but it's just another form of nationality that still exists in the modern day that links itself to a former colony or protectorate and your connection to that place. It's not the same thing as British citizenship, as you will see. So that is where you have no UK-born grandparents, but still have a claim to British citizenship in the modern day. So that takes us on to the next slide. So the next slide here that we will see is basically an example of a later generation. So, and an applicant born outside of Bechuanaland. So here we don't have an applicant in Bechuanaland at all, but the father was born in Bechuanaland with a grandfather, again, not born in the UK, born in any part of the UK which was under a full colony, which we call a crown dominion in this instance. Such places can be South Africa, Southern Rhodesia, Kenya, and so on. In this scenario, we have British subject status being passed on 2 generations, which in the modern day would lead to the applicant again becoming a British overseas citizen, but was born outside of Bechuanaland, unlike the previous example where the applicant, as you can see, was born in Bechuanaland. So again, you have these very sort of specific scenarios which does lead to British overseas citizenship in the modern day. And if one can get the right of abode, which is another form of nationality, status, beg your pardon, that would give full British citizenship when the laws changed on 1st of January 1983. Coming on to my very last slide, we have here a specific scenario where actually the applicant has to be a woman. I'll explain why that is. And the reason why this is she was born in Bechuanaland, so she picks up the British citizenship just by birth, but also gets another form of nationality by descent through her father. Now, assuming she doesn't have any exemptions in her own lineage, i.e. her father wasn't born in a place that remained part of the UK when Bechuanaland became independent, or she doesn't have a paternal grandfather born in the UK, but she was married to a man who does have a UK-born grandparent, for example. If that marriage took place before independence of Bechuanaland, it would actually, would you believe, give this woman an exemption to automatic loss of her British nationality when Bechuanaland did become independent. So by virtue of a marriage, she actually would have a claim, most likely in the certain scenario I just mentioned, to full British nationality at the moment, and she would actually be British now. So that's one of those scenarios where it is geared up only for a woman, but at the same time, she does get that exemption through marriage to a British man. So again, another very specific scenario that we've come across in our workings that does lead to someone becoming fully British, even though in her own lineage, she doesn't have any UK-born ancestry. So I think that's about it from me in this sort of scenarios. I'll hand it back to John.
Thank you, Michelle. So I suppose a number of people are asking, do I have a claim to British nationality, and what are my steps, or what do I do from here? We generally ask most individuals to complete our free online assessment, which you can find on our website. It's quick and easy to complete, and it will basically ask you for places and dates of birth of you, your parents, and your grandparents. And once you've completed the online assessment, you can order what we call a free British passport review. The specialist will look at your family tree, and they will give you one of 5 results from that British passport review. One is a definite claim to British citizenship, which means we will then take you forward to it's a standard claim to citizenship, and we will take it through to an application. You'll get likely, unlikely, unclear, or remote. If you fall into the likely, unclear, unlikely, or remote category, we then need to do more research into your claim, and we will take you forward to what we call a status trace. A status trace is where a specialist researches the law that was in place at the time of each of your family members' birth, and it takes the form of a multi-page report that gives our formal and accurate opinion of your eligibility for British citizenship. That status trace will have 4 results as well. 1, we will find that you do have a claim, and we will move forward to a citizenship application for British nationality. We will look at other nationalities like EU, for example, and how that could benefit you. If there's no claim to citizenship, there could be a possible UK visa option, like an ancestry visa, or there's no claim at all, and we would then unfortunately let you know that you are not eligible for British citizenship. So that takes us to the Q&A side of things. I see a couple of questions have come through, some interesting ones. If we don't get your question here, or you would like to get in touch, I'd encourage you to either visit our website, and there's a chat function on there. You can call us or email us directly, and we'll be able to help you. But I'm going to give the first question to Phil. Phil, this question's from Hayley, who was born in Cape Town. She has contacted us before, but her details are her maternal grandmother was born in the her paternal grandmother was born in the UK. Her father was born in Rhodesia, and she's wondering if anything has changed, which now makes her eligible for citizenship.
Okay, so just to recap on that, Haley's born in South Africa.
Correct?
Correct. Do we know which year?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so we'll assume it's a post-83 birth, I think.
Okay, Haley, if you're listening, you can just post your year and we'll pick that up. Sorry, Phil.
Father born in Rhodesia. So again, we've got to ask a further question. I'm afraid we need to know if that's Southern Rhodesia or Northern Rhodesia.
Okay, so Haley says 1966, September.
Okay. That's her birth, yep.
And it's Southern Rhodesia.
Southern Rhodesia. And do we know where her paternal grandfather is born? And whether there's any link to the UK on the mother's side as well?
Sorry, the paternal grandfather was born in Bechuanaland.
Okay. Okay, so if we run the trace back on this, starting with the father, Southern Rhodesia was a self-governing dominion, and in the period following 1949 has its own form of nationality itself. So the father becomes a Southern Rhodesian citizen at birth. He's also going to become a British protected person by descent. So the British protection by descent that the father picks up isn't necessarily going to help Haley directly, because that only falls one generation by descent. Unlike where if the parent or the applicant's born in Botswana, you get a slightly different effect. It's possible that the father would have a claim to British nationality now if the generation before, so that would be the paternal grandfather of the father was born in the UK. That's going to do something for Haley's father, but not Haley herself. And as far as I can see, assuming that there's no other link in the mother's side, that it's going to give a result of what we'd call a not likely in terms of the assessment for British nationality itself. So Haley would probably have to rely on the ancestry visa to come into the UK there and settle through other means.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. The next question is from Anthea. Anthea has asked, what if your grandfather and father were born in Bechuanaland? Anthea, perhaps you can post where you were born. Anthea's...
Yes, with the year of birth.
And the year. Anthea's paternal grandmother was born in Rhodesia, and she was born in South Africa in 1977. She did become a Botswanan citizen.
Okay, Michelle, do you want to take care of this one?
Sure, John, can you say that Anthea was born in 1977?
Correct.
With her father born in Bechuanaland?
So 1977 in South Africa, yes. And let me just double check.
Sure.
Sorry, there's quite a couple of questions and posts.
I know.
Scroll down. So grandfather and father were born in Bechuanaland. Grandmother was born in
Any
Rhodesia.
other information? Yeah. Okay. So that's one interesting one, I think, for Anthea. We obviously, her birth in Southern Rhodesia doesn't give right to any status, and she probably knows that. But her father's birth in Bechuanaland would give him British protection at the time of his birth. Now, ideally, if her paternal grandfather was born in a place that was part of the UK in terms of full colony, that would have changed things. But he also was born in a British protected place, i.e. Bechuanaland. So the father doesn't, unfortunately, get any other additional status at the time of his birth, except for British protection. Now, I'll probably need a little bit more information from Anthea, but assuming the father doesn't have his own paternal grandfather born in a place that remained part of the UK after Bechuanaland's independence, I can't see how her father would have retained his British protection. Unfortunately, at the time, Bechuanaland became independent, and hence, at the time Anthea was born, most likely he was a Botswanan citizen, which would probably explain why she has picked up Botswanan citizenship herself through her father. So I'm probably of the opinion, again, I'm only assuming here, that she doesn't have a UK line sort of connection through the father's paternal grandfather, that she probably has an unlikely claim to British citizenship through this connection.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Andrew has asked, what about being adopted?
Okay, that's one for me, I think, in which case adoption is an area which is generally not particularly helpful. The laws of some countries, including South Africa, result in an adopted child really being treated as the natural child of the adoptive parents in all areas of law. The same doesn't follow in UK law, not UK nationality law specifically here. So you can't take into account the nationalities of your adoptive parents, and you can't claim through an adoptive parent's British nationality. You always have to have a look at the birth parents. So any rights that an adopted child acquires through the birth parents are not extinguished on the adoption, and you can pick those up. So a natural father being born in the UK or Protectorate in this case could be beneficial, but not an adoptive one. The only exception to that is where the adoption has taken place in the UK itself, and that there's no further exceptions. Okay, I think that's hopefully pretty clear, John.
Thank you. Alice has a double question here. So it starts with, I assume that everyone born in Bechuanaland during the Protectorate period, 1885 to 1996, had British protected status. What happened to British protected status on the 30th of September 1966?
Good question. Should I take that one?
Just to give you a second, sorry, gents. The second part of that is then, can you please explain clearly what rights of abode is for Alice as well?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll take the first part and you go for the second, Michelle. Sure. So what happens on Independence Day? So basically, the UK has a two-part system. So where the subject, the person born in Bechuanaland, becomes a local citizen, so acquires Botswanan citizenship under the Independence Constitution, generally speaking, the right to British protection will be extinguished. The right to citizenship of the UK and colonies, on the other hand, is a different matter altogether. That's the status which leads to modern day British overseas citizenship. And on that particular status, there are a number of different exemptions to the automatic loss of British nationality. So if you're a citizen of the UK and colonies in the early pre-independence period, and you become a citizen of Botswana, for example, if your paternal grandfather or your father was born in the UK or a place which remains part of the UK and colonies at that point, then you retain your British nationality. Equally, in terms of British protection, you should also note that if to lose the British protection, you have to become a local citizen of Botswana. And the Independence Constitution of Botswana doesn't give Botswanan citizenship to those born outside of the territory if another citizenship is acquired at birth. So that's the example we were looking at with the father being born in the Protectorate at the Protectorate time, but the next generation being born in South Africa. Assuming the father retains British protection himself, that can probably be passed to further generation by descent. Okay, right of abode, Michelle, you?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, absolutely. So, Alice, you mentioned something about the right of abode and what that is. So, the right of abode is basically a status that's issued under the Immigration Act 1771, and in a very brief way of explaining, it was brought into force in the sort of 70s to differentiate mainly leading up to the 1981 Act coming into force on 1st January 1983. Those who are seen as belonging to the UK and those who are seen as belonging to a UK territory or an overseas territory, which would eventually become independent. So the idea there was giving the right of a vote to those, ideally in most scenarios, those who have UK-born grandparents and who are citizens of the UK colonies themselves. So for a quick example would be someone born in Kenya, for example, who picked up citizenship of the UK colonies but had a grandparent born in the UK. In that scenario, that person would be a citizen of UK colonies leading up to when the laws changed in 1983 with the right of a board. Now, in that scenario, on the 1st of January 1983, because that person has citizenship of the UK colonies and the right of a board, they would be automatically reclassified as full British citizens. Whereas someone who was just seen as just belonging to that territory, so for the Asians in Kenya, for example, they don't have UK-born grandparents and similar background to mine, actually. And in those scenarios, what would end up happening here is although they would remain citizens of UK colonies after Kenya's independence, they wouldn't pick up the right of a board when it was being issued in 1971 onwards. And in that case, on the 1st of January 1983, without the right of a board, they would be automatically reclassified as British overseas citizens. Now, those are still passports that are very much, in fact, they look the same as British passports, bar the fact that on the description of the holder it says British overseas citizen, which doesn't entitle them to full rights as full British citizens do. So right to vote in the modern day can be claimed by those who are British citizens, but for dual nationality restrictions, don't hold a British passport, so they can have the right to vote on their other passport, or those who registered or naturalized as British citizens but don't have a British passport. So those are the modern day examples of someone claiming the right of a board. So I'm hoping that's sort of clarified what exactly that status is in terms of a historical context and a modern day context for yourself.
Great answers and very
It
informative.
might be worth mentioning, yes, that there's other ways in which the right of a vote can be acquired as well, some more obscure ones. Particularly in the period before 1983, women would acquire the right of a vote if they were from Commonwealth countries, if their husbands did. And there's also reference to those that were resident in the UK itself, in addition to those that have got lineage or ancestors from the UK. It becomes clear to me when we're doing these talks that the concepts we're talking about can be quite complicated sometimes and difficult to follow. So certainly with Alice, if she wants to put forward her exact family tree details, then we can probably give a more specific answer if she's asking on behalf of herself.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alice. What we'll do is we do have your email address. We will forward you a link to complete the assessment as well. Thanks, gentlemen. Moving on to Martin's question. Martin was born in South Africa in 1985. His father was born in Bechuanaland in 1961. Does he have a claim?
Phil?
Okay, so first thing to note for Martin is that he's born after inception of the British Nationality Act 1981, which comes into force on the 1st of January 1983. With this act and with another similar act which affected British protection, unfortunately, all claims to UK colonial nationality by descent stop. So if you're born after the 1st of January 1983, it's impossible to claim British protection or any of the other forms of British colonial nationality in the modern day. So I'm afraid we need to look no further than that, I'm afraid, Martin. You definitely won't have a claim. Sorry
for that bad news, Martin. Moving on to Precious. Precious was born in South Africa in 1988. I think we're going along Martin's line here, but has a father born in Botswana and a mother born in Transkei. Does she have a claim?
Okay, I'll deal with that one again, because again, it is a similar one. Yes, unfortunately, Precious, being born at that particular point doesn't help. You need to be born before the 1st of January 1983 to have any potential claim there. Transkei, for British nationality purposes, has always been treated as part of South Africa. So would only lead to a claim to South African citizenship, not any other form of UK citizenship, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Here's an interesting one from Wendy. But my paternal grandfather was born in Vryburg in 1898. Her father was born in Witbank in 1942. And Wendy was born in Johannesburg in 1962. Wendy's mother is on an ancestral visa currently, and due to her grandfather being born in the UK. So it's Wendy's great-grandfather was born in the UK.
Okay, you okay with that one, Michelle?
Sure. Sorry, John, did you say Wendy was born in South Africa in 1962 with her father born in South Africa
Yes.
in 1942
Yes.
and paternal grandfather also born in South Africa
Yes.
in the pre-so 1900 period,
1898, yes.
1898, but her maternal great-grandfather on the maternal line is born in the UK.
Correct.
Fine. So unfortunately, again, in this scenario, the great-grandparent connection is a little bit too far to sort of make a dent on or have a claim in the modern day for herself. And the reason I say that is with the South African connections, most likely the British nationality would have been extinguished in the sort of 1949 period. And from then on, South African citizenship took over. So I'm guessing at the time of her birth, if all that is correct, then her father would just have South African citizenship. And in terms of her mother, she may have a claim to double descent in her own lineage to her paternal grandfather, which is yet to be seen. But I doubt that would be available to her, the applicant here, who was most likely born a generation sort of too far out in terms of her nearest UK connection. So I'm afraid that one will have to be an unlikely scenario for myself, John.
Okay, great. Moving on to Ellen. Ellen's paternal grandfather was born in Bechuanaland in 1893. Her father was born in South Africa in 1923. And Ellen was born in Southern Rhodesia in 1954. Perhaps we have some better news for Ellen.
Oh, Phil?
Do we have anything on the mother's side of the family?
Yeah.
I suspect not, if Ellen hasn't mentioned anything. Again, realistically, you've got to remember that the British protected person status can't pass 2 generations by descent. The only time when you get double descent claims coming into play with Botswana is where the applicant or the father, in this case it's the paternal grandfather who was born in the Protectorate. So one thing we can say for certain is that the father acquired British protected person status by descent, but that only travels 1 generation by descent, where there's no connection to a crown dominion going back. So there could be, again, if the father was still alive, potential for the father to make a claim if the generation before, so the father's paternal grandfather, was born in a crown dominion. But otherwise, that's not going to help Ellen in any way. And birth in Southern Rhodesia, which was a self-governing dominion within the British Empire in 1954, isn't going to give rise to any form of British nationality either. Southern Rhodesian citizenship would have been commuted to Zimbabwe and later on, unless Ellen's moved to South Africa, in which case she's probably become a South African in the meantime. So I'm afraid, based on what you've got there, again, you'd have another unlikely outcome for UK citizenship.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, so I'm scrolling through the questions. Some of them seem to be similar, so I will try to get back to them. I'm just looking for some items. Here we go. So from Brian. So grandfather born in Bechuanaland in 1894. This is from Brian. His father was born in Mafeking in 1923, which is part of the Union of South Africa. Or he says it was apparently part of Bechuanaland at the time, and he was born in South Africa in 1959.
Okay, Brian's actually right. Mafeking
Yeah.
was the capital of Botswana or Bechuanaland at the time, but it was still actually part of the Union of South Africa. For citizenship purposes, it was just that the capital was based outside of the territory itself, which is unusual. Again, you got the same issue here with the grandparent being born in Botswana. The father is going to have a claim to British protection by descent, but that's not going to pass to the next generation down, unless we've got connections to perhaps the UK on the other side of the family. So it's a very similar position to the last. Having the grandfather born in Botswana is not helpful in these situations. Having the applicant or the father born in Botswana is very helpful.
Okay.
So this would fall again to an unlikely position in terms of nationality.
Okay. We have a question from D. My father and mother were born in Botswana. My grandfather was born in South Africa, and I was born in Rhodesia in 1949. That's D.
Where were her parents born, did you say, John?
In Botswana. She has posted
Okay,
dates.
and
D, if you can post dates, that would be great.
grandparents?
Grandfather was born in South Africa. She's only listed one grandparent, so I assume the rest as well.
Okay, this probably, I mean, we'll probably have to find out a little bit more from D, but assuming that's the paternal grandfather born in South Africa with his son, i.e. the father born in Bechuanaland and D born in 1949 in SA, then potentially here she could potentially have a claim here to British overseas citizenship in the modern day. We would obviously need to know a little bit more about that grandfather born in South Africa, whether that's the maternal grandfather, the paternal, because that would make a difference to that outcome. So let us know, John,
Okay.
if she does confirm
D.
which grandfather it is, but yeah,
Okay.
looks quite likely.
D, that sounds promising.
Yes, I would agree with that. That's promising. Just a word on British overseas citizenship and British protection. So it's probably worth noting that the UK has, would you believe, 6 different forms of UK nationality, and they all have different rights associated with them. Many people think having the secondary statuses like British overseas citizenship or British protection might not be as good as it sounds, but it should be remembered that those statuses give visa-free travel to the UK, unlike South African passport holders these days. And the main advantage of having that residual status has been demonstrated very recently by what's been going on in Hong Kong. So the citizens of Hong Kong have a right to a British colonial nationality called British National Overseas, which is another variety. And you've probably heard in the news that the UK government has now agreed to give all of those people settlement rights in the UK because of what's going on with the Chinese government and because they perceive the territory becoming a little unstable. So if you qualify for British protection or British overseas citizenship, and that doesn't automatically get you into the UK, it's still very much worthwhile having. If your country of origin becomes unstable, the UK government then have a obligation to accept you in the UK, in addition to the other benefits. So they're very important in my view. Okay, John.
Okay. Just D. Okay, that's great grandfather.
Did he confirm?
She just said that her great grandfather was born in Scotland, but I don't think.
I think she mentioned that grandfather is paternal. Further up, I think.
Yes.
Is that correct? Can you see? Is that true?
Grandfather is paternal, yes.
Good. Yeah, well, that's good.
Well, that's
promising.
looking promising.
Okay.
That's looking promising for at least British overseas citizenship at the very least. With the great grandfather, that might not be good in terms of full nationality because it's too far out, perhaps. But we can obviously have a closer look to see if we can pull the right overboard from somewhere else to give a full nationality as compared to British overseas citizenship.
Okay.
Would encourage you to have a look at that. Potentially a husband, yes.
So Dee, if you can please do us a favor and complete that online assessment, as we mentioned,
Yes.
punch in the dates and places of birth, and we'll get back to you within 48 hours to give you a good idea of whether you should pursue this further. A question from Marilise. She got an unlikely answer from our online assessment, and she's asking, would we say it's worthwhile doing a status trace? Her grandfather was born in Bechuanaland in 1914. Her father was born in Bechuanaland in 1941. And she was born in South Africa in 1972.
Phil?
Okay. Do we know where the father's paternal grandfather was born?
Not yet. So Marilise, if you can let us know where your paternal grandfather was. She is typing. We'll see what her response is here. So Phil, sorry, you asked if
Just in other terms of
where was her paternal grandfather born?
where her paternal grandfather's father. So that would be her great-grandfather.
Okay, great-grandfather. Marilise, if you can just post where your great-grandfather was born, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, just in other terms, if anyone gets an unlikely when they fill out these online reviews, I mean, all of the knowledge that we've built up over the years has been really created by people like you coming along and saying, well, actually, can we have a good look at this? I don't want to quite take no for an answer in terms of general provisions, and I want you to look at this in detail and go forward. And that's actually how a lot of the discoveries we've made have been made over the course of the years. So if someone does get an unlikely, obviously you have to look at going forward with a paid research. It is very much of a speculative purchase, if you like. But it can yield results sometimes. Perhaps 1 in every 20 that we see would come through with a positive result at the end.
We had a positive unlikely day before yesterday. The client thinks that their money was very well spent.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to, while we wait for Marilise there, I'm going to give you Douglas's question. Douglas was born in 1963 in South Africa. His paternal grandfather was born in Bechuanaland. His father was born in South Africa. His paternal grandmother was British. And his maternal grandfather was born in the UK, but served in Crown Service in Canada.
What's the date of birth in 1963 for Doug?
He's
John?
just put 1963. He hasn't given a month.
I think we need to be more specific here, because there are some things which could help outside of Botswana.
Doug has responded, and he said it's the 22nd of March.
63.
Correct.
Okay, Michelle, do you want to take care of that one?
Yeah, sure. So for Doug, again, I think we've covered the scenario slightly before, but where the paternal grandfather is born in Bechuanaland, you do get British protection going 1 generation, because the paternal grandfather will pass it on to his father. But whether it will go a 2nd generation is very unlikely. That it will go 2 generations in terms of the British protection. So I'm afraid it probably would be at best a claim for his father, and in terms for Doug, I don't think he'll claim British protection through that Bechuanaland connection in the modern day. We do have a scenario here where there is an ancestry visa option open for Doug, so that would give him a right to come into the UK if there was moving in. And in terms of immediate nationality options, I can't really see any, I'm afraid, Doug. Phil, you want to?
Doug, can I just confirm where your mother was born? Have we got that?
Hasn't said that yet.
So Douglas's mother. I'll have a quick look.
South
There
Africa.
we go.
South Africa. And her father was born in the UK. Is that correct?
Ah,
He says yes.
Great.
Okay. Do you want to
yeah,
finish off then, Michelle?
yeah. That's a good spot. All right, Doug. I think this has just turned completely 180 for you, I'm afraid, but not through the Bechuanaland. So this is not to do with what we've talked about so far. But whilst you've asked us, there probably will be a claim for you through your mom through a recent sort of change in the laws here, where we're talking about claims of British citizenship through the maternal line. So in short, all I would say is, if you were to do our assessment, you probably would get a likely outcome through having a UK-born maternal grandfather and yourself being born in what was a foreign country at the time, because South Africa left the Commonwealth in '62. And that just basically relies on a registration application in the modern day through your maternal line. And we can expand on that sort of in more detail as you come through the assessment route. So yeah, I think overall good news, but not through the Bechuanaland, I'm afraid.
Well, great news either way. I'm going to move on to
Yeah.
Sarah's question. My father was born in the Kenya colony and I was born in Bechuanaland.
Do you know anything about Sarah's paternal grandfather, John?
I don't see. It's only that he was born.
Yeah.
Let me have a look. Born in South Africa.
Okay. So,
Okay.
Sarah, what you've got here is birth in the Kenya colony would give rise to the predecessor of British citizenship, which we call citizenship of the UK and colonies. Whether your father retained that or not in terms of Kenya independence will turn on where his parents were born. If they were both born outside of Kenya, then there's a good chance that he will have retained that British colonial nationality on independence of Kenya. I didn't catch your place of birth.
Let me have a look quickly.
Bechuanaland.
Yep.
It's Botswana
That's
itself,
correct.
so it's before independence. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the citizenship of the UK and colonies from Kenya may well have passed down to you by descent, assuming that your father's retained that if his parents were born outside of Kenya, and you'll also have picked up the form of nationality called British protection. That's probably going to have been lost on independence of Botswana, and whether the colonial nationality from Kenya is also lost at that point, again, will turn on whether you acquired citizenship of Botswana. It looks likely that you did, I'm afraid. So even though your father may have retained his own British nationality, I think it's unlikely that you would have a claim to this yourself, unless, I mean, the only exemptions to automatic loss here would be if you were married to a British man before 1966. That would be one possible exemption. The only other way would be having your father or your grandfather being born in a place which was still a British colony at the time, which Kenya wasn't. It was independent in '63, so that's not going to help. So from what you said, it looks unlikely. You're welcome to fill out the online assessment anyway, and we'll have a look at it in slightly more detail, taking into account your mother's side as well.
Okay, I think there's one final question from Pearl. Let me have a look here. So Pearl says her father was born in 1928 in southern Rhodesia. He became a citizen of Botswana in 1974. Pearl's paternal grandfather was born in South Africa. Pearl was born in Botswana in 1972. And Pearl's paternal grandmother was born in France. As a side note, Pearl's partner and children are British currently.
Did you say the father was born in South Africa or Bechuanaland?
Southern
John.
Rhodesia.
Southern
Yep,
Rhodesia.
in
no, no,
1928.
1928. And the gentleman asking himself was born in South Africa in 1972.
Sorry, it was Pearl. So it's a lady.
Pearl,
Yes, born
yep.
in Botswana in 1972. Correct.
Okay. Okay, I can sort of take over this last one here. So with the South African birth, just obviously Pearl wouldn't get any nationality when she was born. With the Southern Rhodesian connection, although her father would have been a British subject to start off with, and so would have been her paternal grandfather at the same time. He would have been a British subject through the birth and union of South Africa. I'm afraid with not having a connection to a place that remained part of the UK after 1949, we have a situation here where her father and the paternal grandfather acquire Southern Rhodesian citizenship and South African Rhodesian citizenship, respectively, in effect, sort of not acquiring the next form of nationality in the post-49 period, which is citizenship of the UK and colonies. So at the time that Pearl was born, I can't see any route in terms of how the father would have had any form of British nationality or citizenship of the UK and colonies through the Southern Rhodesian and South African connection, unless certain steps were taken to relocate out of those territories into what was still a UK colony. So if obviously our family did move out and move to, say, Kenya colony or Nationality or somewhere else, then obviously she should have a deeper look at this, and we wouldn't be able to do that in the assessment. But from the facts presented, I'll probably say it's an unlikely case for immediate British nationality.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that there were some great questions, excellent answers.
Yeah.
It's definitely worthwhile. A number of these people doing our online assessment. If anything, for peace of mind, fill it in. We can give you answers. And again, you can go on our website www.sableinternational.com. You can contact us on email at citizenship@sableinternational.com or call us on our number, which is on here and on our website. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this webinar. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, guys. Bye now.